Alright, Exiles. A couple people asked me about it, so here it is. This is my first Path of Exile build guide for my Fireball Elementalist, the Krangle Daddy, in the 3.16 Scourge League, my Magdalene. I want to start by just running a map, talk a little bit about how the build works, show you guys how it looks when you're chugging your way through a map. Got a fragment going here, a couple scarabs, sextants are popping off. Let's load it up. I'm running Vitality, Discipline, Clarity, Herald of Ash, Flame Golem, Determination. Take a look at our little map here. There's our mods. We're going to pop our potions, all of them. We're just going to start smashing mobs. We're just chugging. Everything's just going to blow up. You just push the button, you win the game. That's it. Once you get everything all set up, I feel like, for me, this is probably the smoothest, most fun mapper that I've ever made. And that's a big point to keep in mind. This is not a bosser. It's not for your Cyrus. It's not for your Conquerors. Don't be trying any fucking invitations bullshit. It's not what this is for. But Magdalene, the single target's low. That's not what this build's for. You did it wrong. You fucked up. Picked the wrong build. This is for watching them explosions. Pop, pop, pop. That's all I care about. I want to see them explosions. I want those endorphins. Trying to get my fun on, you know what I'm saying? I click these boxes. I don't give a fuck what they say. Maybe they're going to blow up or something. I just don't care. And that's the kind of build I like to play. And once you get this thing geared up, that's what you're doing. And I mean, I might die. Once in a great while, you'll die. But I mean, character's level 98. Once you get your defenses in order, man, you're all set up. You got the inspired learnings popping off. Everything just dies. Sometimes my health gets low. I push a button. It's not low anymore. That's how I do it. Ooh. Ooh, almost died there. I was talking some shit and I almost died to some kind of degen. But saved by the potion. That's what it's all about. The potion saves you. Run away from that fireball. I mean, you could probably eat it. I wouldn't. Jump into the Krangle again here. Clear out a few more of these mobs. As you can see, pretty much everything dies off screen. But the stuff that you do run into on screen is not really a problem. We're gonna jump into the boss room here. Do a gem swap for single target. We're just gonna run in here. We're gonna drop a totem, a couple flame walls, pop our ball molten shell, and then we're just gonna start pewing at the boss. Boss is dead. Map's over. You won the game. It's Path of Exile. So, is this build budget? Nah. Very expensive. But not stupid expensive. It's achievable expensive for a serious player, but it's not entry level. I'd say you're probably looking at 30 to 50, 60 exalt to get going here with the type of setup that I've got. Should you league start it? No. It was fucking brutal. You need the baseline gear to get going. But level 85 or so with some basic gear, you know, we're talking 10x or less total investment. That it feels fine at that point. You're chugging through maps. You just don't have the defenses, so you're going to die a lot more. Leveling becomes an issue at about 95, that type of shit. But you solve those issues by getting a, you know, piece by piece by piece that has the fucking Krangle shit that you want on it, or it's got it corrupted with an implicit, whatever. You get it all set up one piece at a time, but the build functions at a base level, super budget, but not like a bare bones league start budget. Like, you need some exalts in the bank to start buying some stuff before you play this. So from here, I'll go into the gems, the gear, you know, why do I have this anointment? Why do I have this, that, whatever? We'll do all that. We're going to do the skill tree. And then at the end, I'm going to do a map showcase. I'll throw some footage together, put some music behind it, that type of deal. Hope you'll stick around. This is the Krangle Daddy. So gearing this character is a pretty complex proposition. I have basically spent a month and a half off and on buying an item here, changing items there. I would buy something for 2x and then sell it for 1x later. I lost a lot of currency and, you know, experimentation, and so it's hard to estimate the total value of the items here, but you're well over 30-40x, I would think, to be able to just buy these items. And then you're going to encounter a lot of instances where the item is just straight up not available in the league. And it's difficult to price check some of these items because you can't look, for example, at a standard league counterpart to the item, because, like, for example, in the instance of this staff, there's not one that exists in standard that has increased spell damage as a Krangled implicit. Maybe there's ones that have been double corrupted that are better, etc. I'm not making the claim that I have the best gear or anything like that, but I do have very specific gear. And so if you're trying to emulate what I'm doing here, the problem that you're going to encounter is that I was able to get items early that solved specific problems that I was having with the build. And so you'll have to do your own problem solving, which will be determined by the availability of items as well as your budget. But do not go into this thinking that you're going to be able to, you know, have the gear that I have for 5 or 10x or 15x and then have the same gameplay experience that I'm having. But having said all of that, this build functions. It crushes tier 16s, no problem, without having any of this stuff. It can be undercapped on res, and a few of the items are fucked up, and you don't have some of the shit that you want, and your skill tree is not all the way completed. You'll just die a lot. And so if you're trying to get to high levels, 96, 97, 98, whatever, then that becomes a problem, and you're going to have to start investing in items to allow you to compensate for the damage that you're taking in some way. And I'll go over the ways that I solve that, but if you want to emulate the way that I have solved those problems, unfortunately you will just have to try and find the items that I found. So let's start with the gems here. In the helmet, I have my Vitality, my Flame Dash, linked with Arcane Surge, huge damage boost. Also helps with mana, etc. And then Determination. Our main damage setup for Vol Fireball is Divergent Inspiration. I don't think you need the Divergent, and you could also take the Anomalous, I believe, which would give you reduced mana cost of the skill, which might actually just be better. I wanted to try the crit, and it feels like it makes Elemental Overload proc more reliably. I like it. Then I'm running GMP, of course, which I swap out for Swift Affliction. And if you look here, I'm about 108k. If I swap this guy in, it pops me up to 144. That's a big damage boost. And obviously you have to aim and whatever, but for cases where I am bossing, that's what I'm going to end up doing. Though this is not a bossing character, as I've said. Then here I have Combustion, Cruelty Support, and Faster Casting. And then our Flame Wall setup has Efficacy, and then Elemental Focus, Swift Affliction, Awaken Controlled Destruction, and Awaken Burning Damage. In my gloves, I have my Herald of Ash and my Discipline, as well as a Spell Totem with Wave of Conviction set up to apply Fire Exposure. And then here I have the Cast When Damage Taken in Vol Molten Shell, and then Clarity, and finally my Flame Golem. Now, talking about the gear itself, The Martyr of Innocence is the best staff that I've been able to find. I suppose there's probably rares that you could get that would be better, but I don't know how to make them. I haven't taken the time to try and shop for them. I imagine they're very expensive, etc. I was lucky enough to find this one that's crangled up with increased spell damage. The reduced mana recovery sucks. I've been able to compensate for that for the most part, but man, if you could get one that had this spell damage mod, but then something that we don't care about, like deal no chaos damage or something, that would be amazing. The helmet has the fireball damage enchant, which is mostly unavailable on helmets that you actually want to wear. You might just have to do without. And then I use this slot to compensate for my cold res really hard. And so you may be able to get different gear that has better resistances, and so you can have some more flexibility on the helmet. But this is what I've had to use, and it's got pretty decent armor and the enchant, so I'm happy with it. The amulet is, you know, your standard +1/+1. I have one that has strength and dex. I actually did drop an exalt onto this item, and I got the cold damage added to attacks, which is a dead mod for the build, so that kind of sucks. But it is what it is. It's still a cool amulet. They're pretty expensive. I think you could craft it yourself, and I don't think it's that difficult, but I didn't want to mess around with trying to buy the bases. The chest piece that I chose to use is an Aziri's Splendor. As far as I could find in my price range, this had the most energy shield, as well as offering me the big defensive mechanic of the life gain and mana gain on kill, and that's how I compensate for having pretty shitty, having a pretty shitty mana setup in general. This helps out a lot with that while you're clearing. It's difficult to get one of these with the energy shield this high. At the time that I bought it, it was the only one in the league that was even close. You could, of course, just buy one and try and divine it yourself and whatever, but it is what it is. If you can get one of these, it works well for me. Gloves, the Asenath's Gentle Touch. I got one that's crangled with projectile damage. I was pretty happy to grab that. You could just not use them. I don't know exactly how much use the explosions are for us. And if you're done leveling and you don't care about dying more often, you don't really need the temp chains either. So you could probably get a rare that would increase the damage quite a bit, but I'm happy with the setup that I have. I may grab a rare at some point and use it specifically for bossing, but for the most part, I think this is fine. For rings, I've got a Flammability Curse ring here. Pretty standard. I think I paid an X or two for it. This one's nothing crazy. Probably the cheapest item in the build. And then here I have a Circle of Anguish that has some really delicious implicits on there. And of course your standard Herald of Ash mods at the bottom there. This one is going to be tough to repeat. It's going to be tough for you to grab. I couldn't find any that had any more than just the one fire implicit, so that's worth keeping in mind. You could, of course, use a Barracks Respite, and I have one here that has chance to gain Frenzy Charge on kill, which is awesome. It feels really good to play Fireball with 3 or more Frenzy Charges. But I got way more damage out of this ring, so, you know, do whatever you have to do. And then the belt here, pretty standard. Some energy shield, some armor, resists. Need to get that chaos res. As you can see, mine is right on the edge here at 1%. It would be really nice if it was higher. And then I've got my Corrupted Blood immunity on the Abyss Jewel. This is, I think, like a 6 or 7x purchase that I made, I think a week and a half ago, so it would have been week 6 of the league. So you could get a shittier jewel. You could just not have the Corrupted Blood immunity on there, and then it's significantly cheaper. You could probably have better mods. You can get one with Hinder which is really nice. I used one that had that for quite a while. And then the boots, I have Tailwind and Onslaught. I think these were probably the single biggest quality of life improvement for the build that I made from day one until now. And if you can get a pair for 5 or 6x, it's amazing. The Tailwind just feels really good. It basically, for me, eliminates the remainder of those instances where you sort of run into a pack and then just get shit on, that I was already compensating for with some things in the skill tree. I've got some knockback, and the slows that we have, all of that is for the purpose of stopping those crazy ass packs in the Krangle and in the Delirium and whatever from getting to you. Tailwind helps with that because it gives you the action speed, and I'm not 100% sure exactly how that works, but what I can tell you from the experience of playing the build for a long time without Tailwind and then playing it with Tailwind, it just feels like you have more control when you're stopping and trying to do the stutter stepping and casting. It feels smoother, feels way better, you die less. I would say probably these are your first major grab after you've got your basics set up with your resists and whatever in your gear. You've got your staff going and whatever. And then lastly, for the life flask, I'm using Panicked and Sealing on the life. Some movement speed on the Granite flask. You could probably get, I mean, almost anything would be more practical, but fuck it. Dying Sun, obvious, gives you the huge AoE. I divine this one to 20. You'd like to have it run longer than 4.1 seconds, but it is what it is. Then the Cinder Swallow Urn is huge. The 3% life per second is amazing. I feel like anything that gives you more than 2%, where where you're pushing a button and then it happens, it feels good. It feels like similar to if you just pop off an Enduring Cry, something like that. But then on top of it, we're getting extra damage on enemies, and then the recovery of 3% of energy shield when you kill an enemy is huge. And that's another way that we compensate in this build for not having as much armor as you would like. Oh no, somebody wants to trade. Maybe next time, buddy. And then lastly, the Quicksilver Flask. I went ahead and put some extra leech on there just to make sure that I'm maximizing that at all times. It stacks with a couple of the things that I have on the tree. And it's worth noting that each craft that I have on these is, very specific. It was really tough to find each piece such that I didn't have resistances that were under cap. But keep in mind, if you have your small cluster set up so that you are generating endurance charges, you're going to get a little bit of res whenever you get hit. It's not ideal, but you might have to have one resistance that's lower. You could also not take the Fire Mastery that reduces your fire res. I believe it's 10 or 20% to the fire crit multi and a reduction of 30% to your resistance. You could not do that and compensate in that way. Resistances were a big problem until I was able to have more currency and just buy items that compensated for it. So depending on your budget, that's a thing to keep in mind. So here's your tree, and just as a disclaimer, this works great for me, but you might have to make some small changes to compensate for the item availability on trade at the time of when you're trying to build this, etc. So keep that in mind. The Ascendancy is straight standard. Grab your big fucking AoE here, grab some Shaper of Flames, grab your shock, you're done. Then you're going to come through here, grab the mana, Firewalker, come through here and grab the life, fire damage, power charge generation here. This is where I do my intuitive leap, tons of goodies in here, stuff for your heralds here, mana, spell block, damage, mana. And then this is a fantastic node for survivability. And then we're going to come through here and grab your elemental overload. It's fucked up for a bunch of people. Works for me, so I'm using it. More damage here. Come up through here, grab your first cluster jewel setup. Some damage here. Life and energy shield. Mana reservation efficiency, you need that, otherwise you can't run the auras that I'm running. I haven't been able to eliminate this from the build. You just have to take it. This is where I do my inspired learning. Get some extra charges, faith and steel, some life here. And it's nice because you're actually we benefit from every node in here, so they're not wasted points. If you can't get enough points to get this setup, I still think it's worth it to use the inspired learning in this setup and just waste these 2 points, because you're still going to generate the extra endurance and you're still going to use this and this. And so you're just using 2 points at that stage to power this jewel, and it's worth it. Then you take some elemental damage here, some res, some life, some regen, and energy shield. Only 1 travel point here, pretty efficient. Divine Shield, survivability, helps us keep up our energy shield since our armor is pretty low compared to what people are generally running now. Second cluster jewel setup. Endurance charge generation on the small cluster. Fan the flames, smoking remains. On the large, I do Thaumaphage for energy shield leech, then some spell block here, and burden projection to knock enemies away from you so you don't get knocked the fuck out in the Krangle. Then here I've got medium cluster jewel with Burning Bright and Flow of Life. That's the expensive one, I believe. I think I paid like 4 or 5x. There might be more now. Watcher's Eye. I've got armor when using Determination, and then Life Leech with Vitality. You might have to get something a little different. Maybe you need reduced mana cost with Clarity. Maybe you're going to work in Malevolence into the build. You could go that route. And then the other setup here, on the large, I've got Smoking Remains again, Prismatic Heart for the resistance, and then Widespread Destruction for the AoE. And then on the medium, Eye to Eye and Repeater for projectile damage. I want the mobs to die right away, and this helps me scale it enough that I'm getting a good balance between the upfront damage and the ignite. It's a little bit more hybrid, and it feels good to me that way. And then here's your only real free jewel socket, so I just went with some damage mods and some life. And then here's your Megalomaniac setup. Mine has Brood for Potency for flask charge generation to support the Cinder Swallow urn. Then I've got another instance of Thaumaphage, and then Brush with Death for the recovery of life and energy shield on kill, and then a little tiny boost to the damage over time multi. That's a really good note though for our defensive setup, and it works really well in conjunction with the chest piece. So that's pretty much the tree. You could also grab a little bit extra mana here. You could get more life and energy shield here. You could get some big damage here. There's a lot of flexibility in what you can do. You could actually put another inspired learning here, and then just sort of take the nodes that you need out of these ones, and that'll allow you to power it. Other than that, we'll go ahead and move on to the next part. This should be about everything you need to know, but again, all of this is in the path of building that you can find in the description. Alright, I think that just about covers everything in terms of the gear and the gems and all of that stuff. If you liked the music that you heard throughout this video, most of that is my original work. Some of it is backing tracks from Thomas McRaughlin's Dreamstream royalty-free music service. I'm just doing solos over top of that. So if you're interested in that, take a look in the description. There's also a link for the path of building. And I'll leave you with a mapping showcase of just me clearing some stuff, and I'll throw on one of my original tracks. So thank you so much for watching. Please do all of the regular YouTube stuff, the liking, the commenting, the subscribing, all of that. And until next time.